Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MSP. This is Ukraine War breaking news update for the 30th of January 2024. This is what concerns a rumour that was swirling around last night for quite some time. People were all over the socials talking about how Zaluzhny had been sacked, and then loads of denials came out. And now the Financial Times has released an article that talks to this. Well, actually, that could be what happened that underwrote all those rumors. Let's go through this article, remembering that it may not be true, fully true. There may be something in it. Who knows? But this is out there, and I think it's such a serious subject concerning the Ukraine war that we do need to talk about it. So Zelenskyy says, the headline here says, Volodymyr Zelenskyy prepares to replace Ukraine's top general. Removal of Valery Zaluzhny would mark the biggest shakeup of military command since Russia's full-scale invasion began. Ukrainian President Zelenskyy is preparing to replace his top general in what would be the biggest shakeup of the Ukraine's military command since Russia's full-scale invasion began 2 years ago. Zelenskyy on Monday offered Zaluzhny, commander-in-chief of the armed forces, a new role, but the general refused, according to 4 people familiar with the discussions. Now, first point is 4 people familiar with the discussions are unknown, unnamed sources. But, you know, to quantify that with the 4, you know, that's a few people, and Financial Times is a fairly credible source as well. It's also worth noting that, you know, generals, high-ranking officers do get replaced in wartime. This is not unusual. I was reading something this morning talking about the number of people that were replaced, you know, in the UK armed forces, for example, during the Second World War and whatnot. So this is not unusual. People do get moved around. If something hasn't, you know, hugely succeeded, then rather than rely on the same person to try and do something else different, you can get new blood in, new ideas in to change things up and affect a new change. Now, the problem here is that Zaluzhny is incredibly popular. He's very popular with the armed forces personnel themselves. He's very popular amongst the public of Ukraine. The stats are fairly consistent that he polls higher than Zelenskyy at the moment in terms of favorability. And so Zelensky's playing with fire a little bit if he does seek to move Zaluzhny or relieve him of his position. But you could make a case that, and Zaluzhny admitted to mistakes, you could make the case that the counteroffensive was based on flawed evaluations of himself and, of course, intelligence, so on and so forth. And he made decisions that, in the end, didn't succeed in a way they initially hoped. Now, remember, my way of interpreting the counteroffensive is it failed within about 3 days, and then they just rejigged and had new metrics of success and weren't necessarily fully trying to get back territory or take territory as a primary objective. They worked on other things like attrition, fixing, attriting of equipment and personnel, and hitting logistics and key targets behind the lines in Crimea, so on and so forth. But if you're talking about the idea that they were going to move 30 kilometers a day, that they were going to sweep through and into Robotyne in the most difficult, most fortified area of the front line, and they were going to reach Tokmak in a number of days, and then hopefully the Sea of Azov fairly soon afterwards, they did not do that. And if you are judging Zaluzhny on that, if he was the main mastermind behind that, then you can make a case that actually, you know, he needs to be moved on. There needs to be new ideas. There needs to be someone who's going to, you know, generate more success. But then the counter arguments will flow. So did they not succeed because of poor intelligence? Did they not succeed because the Allied forces didn't get them the right amount of equipment, the right type of equipment in time for the counteroffensive, that they were forced to commit to a counteroffensive ahead of preparation? That maybe, I don't know the ins and outs, but say Zelenskyy is pressuring for a counteroffensive, and and the army wasn't ready to do one. That maybe they should have sat back for a year and done active defense for a year, exacting a huge toll on the Russians while generating a force that was truly prepared to attack, at some later point in time, sometime in 2024 rather than May 2023. And so there are lots of arguments that will fly around, and bear in mind that almost all of us do not have the requisite information, the requisite knowledge to make sound judgments on this. People like Zaluzhny, but actually people don't really know what Zaluzhny does in those inner circle meetings and with those decisions, and whether he does truly make the right decisions. I'm a big fan of Zaluzhny, and I'm a big fan of Zelenskyy. I think both people will have had incredibly hard jobs, having to make incredibly difficult decisions based on the knowledge they have, and whether that's entirely correct and they have enough information to make those decisions is another question, and whether they had the right equipment, as mentioned, to do what they were hoping to do. It's really difficult for us on the outside to make very decent, concrete judgments on whether Zaluzhny warrants staying in place. I would make a more confident judgment on Zelenskyy because I have seen enough of what he does on the international circuit. And certainly in his role as the leader of Ukraine in generating support for the country and doing international politics and diplomacy, I think he is incredible. I think he's the right man for the job in that respect. What goes on between him and his armed forces, I can't talk to because we aren't privy to those kinds of relationships and conversations that take place and decisions that take place. But it's not uncommon that there is a tension between a political leader and a military leader, particularly when you're at war, when the military leader doesn't understand the political demands and the political leader might not understand the military demands required. And here we are. I would, me, it's complicated, right? I would reserve judgment. Zelensky's going to be making decisions based on where he's at and what he knows and who he is. Now, we could criticize who he is, some kind of characteristic flaws that he might have such that he makes these decisions. But if he is thinking about those decisions, one would assume they're not completely unjustified, right? And likewise, Zaluzhny is going to have made the decisions he's made based on who he is and what he has at his fingertips. And so, when we don't know all the information, requisite information, it's difficult for us to judge. Anyway, two of them said Zelenskyy had made clear to Zaluzhny that regardless of whether he took the role, he would be removed from his current position. The four people cautioned that Zelenskyy had not yet dismissed Zaluzhny and might not do so for some time after reports of the general's ousting appeared in Ukrainian media. On Monday, Zelensky's spokesperson, Serhiy Nikiforov, and the Defense Ministry denied reports about Zaluzhny's dismissal. Quote, "Dear journalists, we immediately answer everyone, no, this is not true," the ministry wrote on its Telegram channel without providing additional context. The president's office declined to comment further on Tuesday. The president's offer of a new role to Zaluzhny follows months of speculation about his fate, fed by repeated reports of tension between the two men. Now, if you are Zelenskyy and you do think that Zaluzhny has to go, and you recognize how popular Zaluzhny is, then moving him, changing his role to something else that's associated with all the decision making and the military is a sensible thing to do, because it's like that middle option. I'm not fully getting rid of you, don't worry everyone. He's still gonna be in this position where he can affect change and help us make military decisions, but he's not going to be the point man in charge of the armed forces, for example. Like, I can see why Zelenskyy would want to do that, rather than just say, right, you're off, mate, because if everyone finds Zaluzhny, if he's such a popular person, then that's an ill-advised move. So their strained relationship spilled into the open in November last year after Ukraine's much-hyped counteroffensive failed to achieve its ambitious goals of retaking lost territory and cutting off Russia's land bridge to Crimea. Zaluzhny then said the war had reached a stalemate. The president's office castigated him for the use of the term. And remember, Zaluzhny did accept that his big mistake was thinking that the Russians wouldn't capitulate and that they would make 30 kilometers a day. He admitted that, and he said that was on him. But actually, that was one of the biggest miscalculations of the counteroffensive. So, in a sense, Zaluzhny is admitting that you can argue that the counteroffensive does, the failure of the counteroffensive, if you see it like that, does rest on him. Quote, this will have a very, very negative impact on the morale of the army. True, Ukrainian military historian Mikhailo Zhirokov told Kyiv's Radio NV, while adding the caveat that he believed the rumors to be a fabrication. Of course, there's always that, Russian fabrication or political fabrication from inner circles within Ukraine could explain all of these rumors flying around. Replacing Zaluzhny could also unnerve Ukraine's Western partners, true, including military officials who have worked closely with the general over the past 2 years when devising battlefield strategies. And it would come at a critical moment in the war as Kyiv waits to see whether billions of dollars worth of critical military and financial assistance from the US and EU will come through. Zaluzhny has not commented on the reports of his dismissal, although on Monday he published an undated selfie with his chief of general staff, Serhiy Shaptala, on Facebook, in which both were wearing Ukrainian army sweatshirts. The post was shared more than 2,000 times and received hundreds of supportive comments within minutes of being published. Reports of Zaluzhny's imminent ousting began circulating on Monday evening in local media and anonymous local Telegram channels and in public comments from politicians closely aligned with former President Petro Poroshenko, whom Zelenskyy defeated in the 2019 election. But 4 people with knowledge of the situation told the Financial Times that a decision had been made in Zelensky's office to dismiss Zaluzhny from his post. What remains to be worked out, according to all 4 people with knowledge of the issue, is a timeline of Zaluzhny's departure, whether he will accept a new role and who would replace him as commander-in-chief. I mean, the problem here is that if you're going to get rid of someone who will have such a font of knowledge of the war and expertise of committing to this defensive war, you are going to have an information loss, an expertise, skills loss. Now, it could be that the person you're getting in has the potential to do greater, to do a better job than Zaluzhny. Who knows? Also has the potential to do a worse job than Zaluzhny. But you are going to have probably a period where that person will not have the requisite knowledge. Possible candidates for the position are Alexander Syrsky. So he is one that is in the Zelenskyy camp, I think. I'm fairly sure he's been criticised quite a bit previously, though. The commander of Ukraine's ground forces, and Kirill Budanov, the head of the country's military intelligence directorate. Both men are close to Zelenskyy. Ukrainian news outlet Mirror of the Week also reported a series of events citing its sources in Zelensky's office. Several other media cited sources as telling them that Zaluzhny had been dismissed or would be let go imminently. A 4-star career military man dubbed the Iron General by admirers, Zaluzhny 50 was appointed by Zelenskyy to the post of Commander-in-Chief in July 2021 and has overseen the Ukrainian military's operations since the start of Russia's full-scale invasion in February 2022. He is credited with orchestrating several of Ukraine's military successes, including the defense of Kyiv in the first days of Russia's invasion and successful counteroffensives or in the eastern Kharkiv region and the southern regional capital of Kherson in autumn 2022. In the Ukrainian poll released in December, 88% of Ukrainians said they trusted Zaluzhny, compared with 62% who said they trusted Zelenskyy. Viewed as a potential political competitor, Zelenskyy has reportedly sought to keep Zaluzhny out of the public eye and bypassed him during key moments of the war by communicating orders to the general subordinates. Now, one thing about Zelenskyy, and Simon Schuster was talking about this, he's just written a book. He was the guy that wrote the Time article that was a little bit controversial about Zelenskyy recently, but I think the book is, I'd be very interested in reading the book, actually. From what I've heard, some fascinating insights into Zelenskyy. One thing that he does, and this has come from several sources as well, is that he asks other people for their opinion, including when someone goes to interview him. He says, well, what do you think? And he's a really good listener. So this is, many people say this, that he's not just a bombastic, sort of person that's like, it's all about me. I'm going to tell you what I think and what I think goes. He's actually he's as good a listener as he is an orator. And he's very good at taking on board other people's opinions and ideas. And, Simon Schuster was saying he'd even like speak to his photographer and say, who's quite close to, is like, do you think that's a good idea? What do you know? If that's the sort of person you are, then your judgments and your decisions are going to be at least fairly well considered. So if you do get to a point where you're going to do this, this isn't just an off-the-cuff decision based on, I don't know, being jealous of Zaluzhny's success or something like that. There's going to be the idea that other people are going to agree with that. Now, if you're only referring to your inner circle when you're doing that, maybe it's just an echo chamber. But I'm fairly sure Zelenskyy would be considered. I think it would be dangerous for us to do knee-jerk reactions either way if it does happen. First of all, this may be a load of bunkum, right? It might not be happening. But if it does happen, either knee-jerk defending Zelenskyy or knee-jerk defending Zaluzhny is probably unwise until we know the finer details. I think what would be fairly safe to say is that it's dangerous to get off your horse halfway through crossing the river. And so but you don't want to back a losing horse as well. So to mash my analogies together. So you're in the middle of the war. You don't want to get rid of the main guy and try and start all over in the middle of doing everything. But actually, it's a relatively quiet period. Nice. Do you know what I mean? It's like neither side is going on massive offensives. It is something of a stasis on the front lines. They're waiting for aid, blah, blah, blah. This could be as good a time as any if you are going to replace your general. But the question is this a losing horse or still a winning horse? Were there other reasons outside of Zaluzhny's control that led to the lack of success for territorial gain in the counteroffensive? I seriously don't think it was possible to have taken territory. I think, I'm rather similar to Andrew Perpetua there in that I think they should have just done what they eventually did, but actually they still poured in a lot of troops into Robotyne and lost a heck of a lot of human beings. A lot of troops, and they come in short supply for the Ukrainians. Really, I mean, they're like gold dust. You can replace tanks probably more easily than you can replace experienced Ukrainian troops. And a lot of people were lost during the counteroffensive that possibly shouldn't have been in that Robotyne area particularly. And the question is, should that have happened at all? And these things are outside the Ukrainians' control, like aid provision, and getting training finished, and so on and so forth. Should it have just waited till later? Who was it that forced that to happen when it did happen? Who was it that really was pushing for that counteroffensive to take place into Robotyne in that large way, such that many people perished for the gain of very little territory? And even if that decision can be laid on an individual, does that still warrant them losing that very important job? Whether it's Zelenskyy or whether it's Zaluzhny, given that even though bad decision may have been made, actually getting rid of them might be an even worse decision. It could have even more worrying ramifications going forward. It doesn't necessarily justify a single bad decision, doesn't necessarily justify being, removed. However, who knows whether there are many more bad decisions? Who knows what's going on behind the scenes and what the relationships are like, what the tensions are like, what the actual decisions being made are, how they can be evaluated. We just don't have the information. But I don't know whether there is any more to these rumours or that we heard last night, or whether this Financial Times article is onto something and this is actually what is taking place. I am of the opinion that this is probably what's happening at the moment, and I will give the FT some credence here in what they claim. But I'm also happy to be shown to be completely wrong here. Who knows? Let me know what you think. Anyway, take care. Speak soon.